Hi, my name is Thomasem Olde Heuveltem. I'm the Dutch author of Hex, and I'm really happy to be with Kulturazja here on the YouTube channel, and we're going to talk about the book.
Let's start from a little bit obvious question. Who was it at the front door in the end of the book?
A lot of readers ask me that. I honestly am not sure. It's up to the reader to decide.
Okay.
And of course, I wouldn't tell, but...
but I had to try, you know.
Yeah, of course. No, I really leave it up to the interpretation. It could be the long lost son, it could be Catherine. What do you think it was?
Tyler.
Tyler, yeah?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And if he's back, is it a good thing?
No, not for me.
It cannot be a good thing, right? No, yeah, that's what I believe, so yeah, there you go.
Okay, why horror? What attracts you to this particular type of literature?
I've been told scary stories since I was a very little kid. I had this uncle, he was a storyteller, and I would spend the night on sleepovers, and he would tell me stories before bedtime. Like when I was 7 years old, he told me Bram Stoker's Dracula. When I was 8 years old, The Witches by Roald Dahl. So he told me the good stuff, and I was influenced by it, and I believed everything he was saying. I had nightmares, and then we would go into the forest and for hikes, and we would pass like a fairy ring, toadstools on the path, and he would say that witches would have danced that night there, and then that I had to walk past it with my eyes closed, otherwise I would get 7 years of bad luck. And I believed it, and I did. So, you know, as a kid, you're very influential in that way. So I guess he planted the seeds for me to do what I'm doing today. And I was, I guess, 11 when I read my first Stephen King novel.
11?
Yeah. It was Pet Sematary, the darkest one he ever wrote.
Oh my god.
It was too young, probably.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
But, you know, I remember to this day, I was in the Netherlands in all these bookstores, and it was in the 90s, and it was on the height of King's popularity. All these novels by Stephen King on the shelves. I knew all the back text by head. I knew them all. I didn't know, I hadn't read the books yet because my mom wouldn't let me, but I knew them all. And then I told myself that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to write scary stories and have them published all over the world.
What inspires you, in general?
In general, good books, good movies, real life, anything basically. What I like to do is you take situations from real life, and in my mind you take the next step. You imagine stuff, what would happen if something out of the ordinary would happen. Like in Hex, it's based on a very small Dutch town that really exists, a bit secluded near the German border, in the hills, in the woods, and it's a normal Dutch society. And I wonder what would happen if you introduced like this element of the supernatural. How would it affect the society? And then of course the new edition of the book sets in America, but it works the same way. What happens if you introduce this element out of the ordinary into a very normal, simple town? And then that's where, you know, things go out of hand and things will work out themselves.
Is there still something new to be said in a horror, in this type of literature? Or maybe it's not necessary. Maybe the most important thing is just to write a good, scary book.
No, I believe very strongly in originality, and I mean, there's people who say nothing is new in horror, but I don't believe that. What you do, what I did in Hex, I took like the witchcraft archetype, you know, which has been done over and over again, but you twist it in new, fresh ways. Like when I first wrote like a concept for the book, I had an idea of this town haunted by this witch. She had her eyes sewn shut and all that. I wrote a concept for it and I showed it to a friend of mine. He's a filmmaker. And he burned it down. He didn't like it. It was like a 2-page concept and he hated it. And he was right, because it was bland and unoriginal. But then we started joking about it, and we were like, what if she wasn't this scary, ghostly apparition that appears in the corner of everyone's bedroom at night? People are scared by her. But what if she is instead a bit the town's fool? People are used to her. people are used to her appearing in the corner of their bedroom with their sewn shut eyes. And when it happens for this so many a time, they're not scared anymore. They're annoyed by it. And they hang a dishcloth over her face because they want to just go on and read the paper. You know, and that made it work. That's the fun twist that made the book work. So in general, you can take an archetype from the classical horror, but you twist it around in a fresh way and you get a great story out of it.
Exactly, like you said, Hex is a mix of elements from classical horror with a modern twist, with that witch,
yes,
with that haunted village,
yes,
and also new technology. Protecting people from witchcraft. Is it your recipe for a modern horror?
I think so. I mean, imagine what would happen if this happens in your town. If a witch would be present
I really don't
in your
want
town.
to.
Well, it could be fun.
Yeah, I guess.
But we all have an app on our phone where we can track her and we can report her when we see her, and you know, we'll be all with GPS and all that, and that way you can hide her out of sight, which is this Hex control center in the book. They hide her from plain sight when she's next to a public road. They just build a tool shed over her, put a bush in front of her or something. They get creative. But yeah, that's what we would do nowadays. And imagine being a kid in a town like that. You want to break free, you want to get rid of the curse. So you try to make clips of her on your phone and put it on YouTube. I mean, that's how it goes nowadays. Yeah, I mean, there's people who argue that cell phones kill horror because, you know, we cannot get lost anymore. We're always in reach. But I don't believe that. You can use it to your advantage. That's what I try to do in Hex.
The story of people from Black Springs shows it is not a vampire, witch, or, I don't know, ghost that we should be afraid of. The most terrifying creature is man.
Exactly.
You don't have a faith in humanity, don't you?
Not much, right? Yeah. If you've read that book, no, yeah. I mean, I'm very good-natured and positive usually, but my work tends to get pretty dark. Yeah, and indeed, it's the human evil that's the thing in the book that wrecks the town. It's their superstitions, their beliefs, their conservatism to hold on to what, you know, they believe is the right thing to do, but it's actually not. And it's their human fears that build up and gradually rise until they explode. And I believe, you know, I always ask my readers the question, how would you react in a situation like that? And the thing is, we can never really tell. We'd all like to believe that we would be rational, that we would be smart and don't make bad decisions, but you cannot really tell until it happens, and that's a scary thing. I think that's the mirror you hold up against the reader. You
think fear unleashes the basest instincts and
yes,
the worst features?
And not a lot has to happen for it to explode. Like, look at reality. In the Netherlands, when the refugee crisis happened, I don't know how it affected Poland, but in the Netherlands, when all these Syrian refugees came in, really decent people turned into monsters. They tried riots and windows broke and fights and all that stuff, just because an element of the unknown is coming in, and that's a very human element, and that's still, you can grasp that, and even then it triggers very bad things in humans. So if you expand that and have a supernatural element, I think that will bring out the worst in us. Yeah.
But Hex is really scary. It is.
Thanks.
But it also...
I'm really happy it scared you. Yeah.
I know. But it also is pretty humorous. You think
yes,
humor is a balance for fear?
I think so, yeah. You know, it's a fun concept. People are used to her presence. They have to hide her out of sight. So what do? I mean, there's one day in the week where she usually appears pretty randomly, but there's one day in the week where she has a fast, like a rhythm. She comes to the same place every week, again and again. So what they do, arrange like a choir of elderly female singers to just walk with her, so that she hides amongst them and they sing. And I mean, no one wants to listen to an elderly choir, so everybody just gets out of the way. So I mean, you get clever with it, and I had a lot of fun writing it. And people people react differently to a situation like that. Like I said, there would be kids that would want to put her on YouTube, but there's also people that want to be on a good side. So there's the butcher's woman in town that sacrifices pate meat to her every week, and when bad stuff starts to happen, she feels she needs a bigger sacrifice, but needs to fit into a big shopping bag. So she gets creative. So she takes a live peacock and straps it to the witch. I mean, I had so much fun writing that stuff. And then, of course, when you've sucked the reader in and they think it's a pretty humorous read, it suddenly turns really dark and scary.
But it's also a novel full of important social issues. So why you have decided to include the social issues, the horror story?
I don't set out to do that, but it just happens. When I write, I mean, I pick up stuff from real life and combine them with stuff from my imagination. And I like stories that have something deeper to tell than just what's on the surface. I like to dig deeper. I'd like to read books that dig deeper. And it's not in a moralistic kind of way. I don't want to preach anything, or I don't want to convey people to do something or whatever, but I do think it, like I said earlier, it holds up a message, like a mirror to the reader, and it's dark, a pretty dark message indeed, but yeah, I think it's interesting to dig a little deeper, because I mean, we all have a dark side inside, I guess.
Yes, exactly. You said once, we have a lot of primal fears in our society at the moment. What have you meant?
Well, look at what's going on. Like I mentioned with the refugee crisis, but also there are so many conflicts in the world today, and like in the Middle East, in North Korea, and in South America, and Northern Africa, and there's so much inherent fear in people, and it's a great way for people to read books like this to release that fear. And as a writer, you can tap into that fear, and I mean, that's why we go to cinemas and watch horror movies. That's why we read scary books or go to a thrill ride in a roller coaster in a theme park, because we like to be scared in a way, right? And it helps us release these emotions without actually being unsafe.
Okay, about emotions. Steve Grant talks a lot about love.
Yeah.
For that love, he wants to do something socially unacceptable. He sacrifices one person for the sake of another.
Yes.
Do you see a love as a destructive factor?
It's interesting. I think it's a very human factor. Like the book asks the question in the first chapter, who would you rather save, your own son or a small village somewhere in Africa, for instance? And the socially accepted answers, of course, you would save a village, but everyone would save their own son, because that's how people are, and I don't blame them. I mean, I would save my own kid over people I don't know. That's simply how love works. But in that way, it is a very destructive factor, and also because it makes you blind. As soon as love and emotion start to play in, you don't really think straight anymore, and you can make very irrational decisions, and that can have very bad consequences. I mean, everyone knows how love works, right? I mean, we all make bad decisions, so yeah. But he goes very far in that way. I mean, I think that's the theme I got from the first Stephen King novel I ever read, Pet Cemetery, where the father has the opportunity to bring back his deceased son. He's hit by a truck on the road. Would you do it? Yeah, you would go all the way to try if you have that chance to do it. So it's a very dark but also a very human decision, I think.
Do you believe in supernatural? Because authors usually tend to express view either I don't know, vehement atheism or totally hardcore occultism.
Yeah.
What about you?
I am not religious myself. I'm not very spiritual either. A little bit, but what I hate about when people tell me ghost stories, that I mean they've seen a ghost somewhere. What I hate about that is like, okay, but I wasn't there. I want to see it. I mean, I would love to believe it. I want the monster of Loch Ness to be real. I want the Yeti to be real. I want ghosts to be real and all that stuff. I mean, I dig that stuff. I love it. But I've never seen anything like it. So, in a sense, I don't believe the stuff I write, if that's where you're getting to. I believe in the human factor of the stuff I write. But I would love to believe in it. Yeah. Have you ever seen a ghost?
No. But I felt it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Listen, Thomas, do you sometimes afraid of your own writing?
I get.
It's pretty scary.
Yes, I get that question a lot. Like people asking me like, well, in what way do you mean I get afraid? Because I write scary stuff, or because I'm afraid what goes on in my mind that I write that scary stuff?
Both.
Well,
Both.
Yeah. It's hard to scare yourself because the creative process works differently than the process of undergoing reading a book or seeing a movie. I mean, I get scared easily by watching a movie. I mean, I don't dare to watch a horror movie alone at night, for instance. I don't do that because I just get too scared. But when I create, it's different because you're thinking it up yourself. I do have instances, however, where I'm so deeply involved in this really scary scene, and I'm writing and concentrating at the screen and forgetting time and forgetting everything around me, and then suddenly like a branch hits the window and I go, and then you're on a good track. And in my new novel, not this one, but the one that comes after this, the opening scene scared me really badly, and I had a nightmare about it. So I managed to scare myself for the first time.
Congratulations! Yeah.
With that said, there's also another way to interpret the question, like what makes my mind cook up all that bad stuff. People are surprised that I write this kind of stuff because I'm a pretty, happy person and have a very friendly appearance apparently. So that's what people see, and then they read this and they're like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" But I guess everyone has a little dark side, right?
What do you prefer, to spook or to being spooked?
It's both a lot of fun. When Hex came out in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, I got hundreds of messages from people who told me they had to sleep with the lights on, or people who told me that they had nightmares. And that's when you go like that, because that's what you want when you write. And now all these messages come from the whole world. Like in Brazil, it's out, in China, and in the United States, and then all these readers tell me it works for them as well. It's that primordial fear of the image, this dark shape next to your bed that stands there and watches you behind its closed eyes, and you don't know what's going on, just watching you. That's what apparently works for all people all around the world. That's a big scare. So that gives me a lot of gratitude that I can do that. Then again, I'm also addicted to books like that myself, so I like to be scared as well.
People in Netherlands are afraid of what? Ghosts, vampires, and other people?
It's interesting. We don't have a history of the supernatural, superstition, or horror fiction at all, and we're very down-to-earth people. I think the thing we're most afraid of is a human factor of the unknown, like your neighbors, strange people, other people coming in the country, like I said before with the refugee crisis. I mean, there's very human things that Dutch people tend to be afraid of, but in general, I don't think it matters where you're from. Like everyone in the world could be afraid of the dark. Everyone can be afraid of heights. Everyone can be afraid of this strange apparition next to your bed that invades your personal space. Those are very universal fears, I think. Yeah.
This type of literature is popular in Netherlands now, horror stories?
Actually, not really, but somehow my book is. It's really strange.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange how it works. Like, we don't have history of horror fiction at all, but that said, Stephen King is a major seller in the Netherlands and has been for decades. We didn't have any other Dutch horror novelists until I wrote my stuff, and that does really well. When X came out in the Netherlands, it did pretty well, and then 2 years later it was published in America, and we got a lot of like Stephen King's quote and George Martin's quote and all that stuff, and I was invited to a Dutch TV show, and since then it's been on the bestseller list for a long time. So it did extremely well, and not because it's horror, but apparently just because people read it and like the story.
You received a recommendation from George R.R. Martin and Stephen King.
That was pretty awesome.
What was the feeling?
It was amazing, especially King's recommendation. I remember my UK publisher, they published King in the United Kingdom, and they sent him a copy. And they said, don't get your hopes up, because he only blurbs what he really likes. And they'd sent him like a supernatural thriller like a couple of months before. And they thought he would really enjoy that. So they were waiting for his comment. And it didn't come. And weeks passed and the publication date came closer. So they sent him an email like, Steve, did you get a chance to read it? And he wrote back a very short email. Yes, I read it.
Oh my God.
So he didn't like it. So I didn't have my hopes up, but then Hex was published, and 2 weeks later my phone was suddenly exploding, because I was asleep. I was in Europe when it happened, in Italy actually, and the book was out, and King tweeted about it that he loved it, and that was probably one of the best moments in my career so far, because he is my childhood hero. I mean, a lot of horror writers try to avoid naming King as their influence because he's so obvious. It's the most famous pop icon horror author there is. But I mean, I'm proud that he was my influence in that way, because I mean, he's influenced a whole generation of writers, I think, so I'm really proud that he liked my book.
What's next?
I am currently finishing a new novel. It will be bigger than Hex. It will be at least 100 pages extra, and it's going to be a pretty scary book as well. The way Hex is my modern twist on witchcraft, this is my modern twist on the possession story, like The Exorcist, for instance. But what I don't like about possession stories is there's always the religious aspect. Like, it's always a devil, a demon possessing a person, and then the priest comes in to exorcise. That's been done. It worked for The Exorcist, and it worked a couple of times extra, but now it's been done. So I'm a mountain climber. I climb mountains in my free time. So when I'm in the mountains, I always feel that mountains have that's where I get spiritual, actually, because I always feel that mountains have like a soul of their own. Like, they have very strong presences of nature. They're overwhelming factors. And what if you have this climber that has a horrible accident up in the mountains and comes down heavily wounded. He's also taken something down. He's possessed by the soul of that mountain. So that's what the new book's about. And there's this force of nature raging inside of him. It's going to be really cool, I think.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Looking forward.
And also, there's a TV series of Hex coming up.
That was to be my question.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, no, I'm very excited about it. Gary Dauberman is writing a screenplay now. He's an American screenwriter who wrote the screenplay for It last year, for Annabelle and another famous horror movie.
You're planning a Hex sequel. The story of Catherine is not finished yet.
Actually, no. I write standalone novels. I've been asked the question a lot: do I want to, write a sequel? I generally don't. I like books. If you finish the book, you close the last page, it's done. I did write a short story that's like a prequel, like set in the time, like in the 17th century when Catherine was convicted of witchcraft. That was adapted for a play in the Netherlands. That was quite fun. But I don't think it will be actually a sequel. I like to, move on to new stuff.
So, thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you for the conversation. And fingers crossed for the TV series.
Yes, that will be really exciting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.